Welcome to English Every Day.
The Love Rosie Story. Part 1. Childhood Friendship. Rosie Dunn and Alex Stewart were more than just friends. They were like two halves of the same whole. From the time they were little, growing up in Dublin, they did everything together. They played in the park, studied for school, and shared their biggest secrets. There was something special about the way they understood each other, as if they could speak without words. When Rosie had a bad day, Alex knew just how to make her smile. When Alex was feeling unsure about his dreams, Rosie was there to listen, offering support and encouragement. They were inseparable. Even their families knew that Rosie and Alex were like siblings. The Stewarts were practically part of Rosie's family, and she loved spending time with them. Alex, being the only child, always felt like Rosie was the sister he never had. They would walk home together after school, talking about everything and nothing at the same time, their laughter filling the quiet streets of their neighborhood. As they grew older, their friendship only grew stronger. They didn't need anyone else. They had each other. They were the best of friends, and there was nothing they couldn't share. They talked about their hopes, their fears, and their plans for the future. They dreamed of big things. Rosie wanted to be a successful businesswoman, and Alex had a passion for studying abroad and exploring new opportunities. They promised each other that no matter where life took them, they would always stay in touch and support each other. But sometimes, life has a way of changing things without warning. One evening, as they sat in the park, looking at the stars above, something unexpected happened. They had been talking about their future plans, the things they wanted to do, and their excitement about what was ahead. As the conversation slowed, they found themselves just sitting there, enjoying the peaceful silence. It was then that Alex looked at Rosie differently, like he was seeing her for the first time. Rosie felt the shift too. Their laughter faded, and they were left with something more, something deeper. They stared at each other for a moment, unsure of what was happening between them. And then, without thinking, they shared a kiss. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't expected. It was a simple, gentle kiss, but it felt like the whole world had shifted in that moment. Rosie pulled away first, her heart racing. She could see the surprise in Alex's eyes. They both knew this wasn't just a casual kiss. It meant something more, but neither knew how to deal with it. They didn't speak for a long time after that. Both of them were lost in their thoughts, trying to understand the new feelings that had just started to grow between them. The friendship that had been so easy and natural now felt different. The line between being best friends and something more had blurred, and neither of them knew what to do with it. The next day, Rosie had to face her own feelings. She was leaving for Boston soon. This was her big chance. The scholarship that could change her life. It was everything she had dreamed of. But now she was torn. Was she really ready to leave, knowing that her friendship with Alex had changed? Was it possible that something more could blossom between them? The friendship that had once seemed so simple now felt complicated, and Rosie didn't know how to untangle it. She tried to focus on the excitement of her new journey, but the kiss kept replaying in her mind over and over again. The friendship she had built with Alex had always been her foundation. But now she wasn't sure if she could leave it behind. Little did Rosie know that the kiss would be just the beginning of a journey that would take them both in different directions. One filled with unexpected challenges, heartbreak, and eventually the realization that sometimes love finds its way back, even when you think it's lost forever. Part 2. The unplanned kiss. The morning after the kiss, everything felt different. Rosie woke up feeling confused, her thoughts racing in every direction. The memory of the kiss lingered in her mind, like a faint echo of something she couldn't quite understand. It had been just a moment, a simple kiss, not meant to change anything. But somehow it had. She tried to focus on the upcoming days, on the scholarship that was waiting for her in Boston. It was her dream come true, a chance to build a life on her own, away from the familiarity of Dublin. She had been working towards this moment for so long, and now it was within her grasp. But as much as she tried to concentrate on the excitement, her thoughts kept drifting back to Alex. Alex, too, couldn't stop thinking about the kiss. It had happened so suddenly, so unexpectedly. He had always thought of Rosie as his best friend, the one person he could rely on no matter what. But now he wasn't sure what to make of his feelings. Had he always felt this way, and he just hadn't noticed it? Or was this kiss the spark of something entirely new? The night they had kissed, they hadn't said anything afterward. It was as if the moment had left them both speechless. Alex had quietly walked Rosie home, neither of them knowing what to say, as if talking about it would make it more real, something neither of them was ready for. As Rosie went about the usual routines of the day, she noticed that everything seemed to carry a new weight. She hadn't expected this to happen, and it wasn't easy to ignore the way her heart fluttered when she thought about Alex. It wasn't like before, when they could talk for hours without a care in the world. Now, every word felt loaded with meaning, and she couldn't help but wonder if Alex felt the same. But there was also a part of her that wanted to forget about it, to pretend had never happened. She didn't want anything to interfere with her big plans. She had a future waiting for her in Boston, and she couldn't let a kiss change everything. She needed to stay committed to her dream, even if it meant parting ways with Alex. Alex, on the other hand, was unsure of how to approach the situation. He knew they couldn't just pretend the kiss didn't happen. But he didn't want to risk their friendship either. What if Rosie didn't feel the same way? What if this was just a fleeting moment of weakness that would ruin everything between them? The next few days were filled with an awkward tension that neither of them knew how to navigate. They still spent time together, as they always had, but now there was an unspoken distance between them. When they talked, it felt different. The playful teasing, the jokes, the laughter, it was all still there. But something deeper had changed. They both knew it, but neither of them could bring themselves to say it aloud. Rosie's departure to Boston was approaching, and with it, the weight of their unspoken feelings. She tried to distract herself, focusing on packing and making arrangements for the future. But there was no avoiding the truth. She was leaving, and with that, she would be leaving behind Alex, the one person who had always been there for her. As Rosie said goodbye to her family and friends, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unsaid, something that might have made this goodbye easier. But life didn't wait for perfect timing, and sometimes you had to make hard choices. Rosie had made her decision. She was going to Boston, and she couldn't turn back now. But as she hugged Alex one last time before she left, she noticed something in his eyes, a mixture of sadness and something else, something deeper. It was like he wanted to say so much, but the words wouldn't come. And for a brief moment, Rosie wondered if she was making the right choice. Was she leaving behind something that could have been the most important part of her life? With one final wave, Rosie got into the car and left for the airport. As the plane took off, she could help but feel a sense of loss, not just because she was leaving her home behind, but because she was leaving Alex and all the questions about their kiss behind too. In the weeks that followed, both Rosie and Alex would try to move forward, but neither of them would ever forget that kiss. It had changed everything between them, and the question of what could have been would linger in their hearts, unanswered. Part 3. Rosie's unexpected pregnancy. Life in Boston should have been everything Rosie had dreamed of: new experiences, independence, and a fresh start. But instead of feeling the freedom she had imagined, she found herself feeling more alone than ever. The excitement of starting university was overshadowed by the emptiness that came from missing her home, her family, and especially Alex. She kept herself busy with classes, but in quiet moments, she found her mind drifting back to Dublin, to everything she had left behind. One evening, as Rosie was going through her emails, she received a message from her mother. It was just a simple update about family life, but it made her heart ache. She missed the comfort of home, the familiar faces, and the shared meals. But one line in her mother's email stood out. "How's Alex doing? I'm sure he misses you too." That was when it hit her. She hadn't heard from Alex in weeks. She had been so wrapped up in her new life that she hadn't taken the time to check in on him. She quickly typed out a message to him, asking how things were going, and hit send, hoping he was doing well. A few days passed before Alex replied, and when he did, his message was brief. "Everything's fine here. Hope you're doing okay in Boston." It was so typical of Alex, always so calm and collected, never revealing much of what was truly going on inside. Rosie felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't been the best friend lately, caught up in her own world. But she wanted to reconnect. A week after receiving Alex's message, Rosie began to feel strange. She tried to ignore the discomfort, thinking it was just stress or the adjustment to a new life. But when the feeling didn't go away, she decided to take a pregnancy test. Her hand shook as she stared at the results. Positive. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Rosie couldn't believe it. She had been careful, or so she thought. The shock of the result left her breathless. She sat down on the bathroom floor, staring at the test in disbelief. She was pregnant. Her mind raced. She knew the situation wasn't ideal. She had come to Boston for a new start, to focus on her education and build a future for herself. this was not part of the plan, but there was no denying the reality of what was happening. She couldn't just ignore it. Rosie took a few days to process the news, trying to figure out what to do next. She knew she had to tell someone, but she didn't know who to turn to. Her mother was thousands of miles away, and she didn't want to burden her with such a big decision. She had always prided herself on being independent, but now she felt more lost than ever. Eventually, she reached out to her best friend, Claire, for advice. Claire was supportive and understanding, but Rosie still felt unsure about what to do. There were so many options, and each one seemed more overwhelming than the last. As she sat alone in her dorm room that night, the weight of her decision pressed down on her. She had to decide whether to keep the baby, whether to stay in Boston, or whether to go back home to Dublin. None of the choices seemed easy, and she couldn't stop thinking about Alex. What would he think? What would he say if he knew? For weeks, Rosie wrestled with her thoughts. She reached out to Alex in small bursts, brief messages asking about his life, trying to keep the conversation light. But her heart wasn't in it. She was hiding something from him, something that felt too big to keep inside. She longed to tell him everything, but at the same time, she was scared. What would Alex say? Would he feel responsible? Would it change everything between them? Then, one evening, while walking to class, Rosie ran into an old friend from Dublin. It was a moment of serendipity, someone familiar, someone who understood her past. They talked for hours, and when the conversation turned to Rosie's situation, she found herself breaking down, confessing everything. The relief that came with sharing her secret was overwhelming. For the first time since she'd found out, Rosie felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of the world alone. She made a decision that night. She would return to Dublin. She did know how she would tell Alex, but she knew she couldn't stay in Boston, pretending everything was fine. She needed to face the reality of her situation, to be with her family, and to figure out the next step. Part 4. Alex moved to America. While Rosie was back in Dublin, grappling with her unexpected pregnancy, Alex was far away in America, trying to build the life he had always dreamed of. When he initially arrived in the United States, everything appeared to be a new beginning. The city was alive with opportunity, and Alex felt ready to take on the world. He threw himself into his studies and his work, trying to carve out a place for himself. At first, it was exciting. He was meeting new people, exploring new places, and pushing himself to grow in ways he never had before. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He missed Dublin. He missed the comfort of home, his family, and most of all, Rosie. Their friendship had always been a constant in his life. And now, in a city where he knew no one, he felt the absence of that connection more than ever. The silence in his apartment, the long hours spent alone, reminded him of the days he spent walking home from school with Rosie, talking about everything and nothing. In the months that followed, Alex found himself thinking about her more and more. He tried to focus on his studies, on building his career, but thoughts of Rosie kept interrupting his concentration. Her laughter, The way she could make him feel better on even the worst days haunted him. He wondered how she was doing, if she was happy in Boston, and whether she ever thought of him the way he thought of her. As much as Alex tried to move forward, he couldn't deny the feelings he still had for Rosie. He had never stopped caring about her, and as time passed, he realized just how much he missed her. But there was something else nagging at him, a feeling of guilt. They had shared something special back in Dublin, that kiss, and it had left him wondering what could have been, but he had never told her how he felt. Maybe it was too late now. Maybe she had moved on. Alex dedicated himself to his work, convincing himself that he needed to remain committed. But even in the business of life in America, he couldn't escape the truth. He missed Rosie. He longed for the days when everything had been simpler, when their friendship was enough to fill every empty space in his life. But now, things were complicated. They had both changed, and the distance between them only made everything harder. Over time, Alex began dating someone in America. Her name was Sarah, and she was kind and easy to be around. She liked Alex, and he found himself growing fond of her too. But deep down, he knew that something was missing. No matter how much he cared for Sarah, she was not Rosie. He realized that no matter how far he went from Dublin, no matter how much time passed, Rosie would always have a special place in his heart. One evening, after a quiet dinner with Sarah, Alex received an unexpected email from Rosie. She had sent a simple message just to check in and see how he was doing. He felt a rush of emotions as he read her words. It had been months since they had last talked in person, and yet, here she was, reaching out again. He quickly typed a reply, telling her everything was fine, and that he missed her. But he couldn't bring himself to say more. He didn't want to burden her with his feelings, especially when he wasn't sure where they stood. He did know if she still thought about him, or if the kiss they had shared meant anything to her. But despite his doubts, he continued to write to her, keeping their friendship alive through emails and texts. He wanted to be there for her, even if they couldn't be together. He wanted to know how she was doing, even if the distance between them made it hard to really connect. As the months passed, Alex's relationship with Sarah grew more serious, but it never felt like the connection he had with Rosie. He found himself comparing the two, wondering if he was making a mistake. But he didn't know what to do. His life was moving forward, but his heart was still tethered to something or someone in Dublin, and he couldn't shake the feeling that things were not as they should be. Part 5. Missed Opportunities. As the months turned into years, both Rosie and Alex tried to move forward with their lives, each navigating the changes and challenges that came with their new realities. They both faced growth, heartbreak, and the normal ups and downs of life. But despite the passing time, they could never quite escape the feeling that something was unfinished between them. Rosie, back in Dublin, tried to adjust to her new life as a mother. Her daughter, Emily, was a source of joy, and Rosie poured all her love into raising her. It wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself in Boston, but it was her reality now. Her family and friends supported her as best as they could. But there was always a quiet longing in her heart, a longing for a life that could have been, for a different path that might have included Alex. She threw herself into her work and raising Emily. But when the day's chouse finally slowed down and Rosie had some time to herself, she couldn't help but wonder what Alex was doing. She would occasionally check her email, wondering if he would reach out. But the messages were few and far between. They exchanged polite updates, but there was never any mention of the past. No mention of the kiss. No mention of the feelings that still lingered between them. One evening, Rosie received an invitation to a wedding. It was a friend from college, someone she hadn't seen in years. The invite was a reminder of the passage of time, of all the things that had changed since she had left Dublin for Boston. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was worth going. But deep down, she knew she needed to reconnect with the past, to remind herself of who she had been before everything had changed. So, she decided to attend. At the wedding, Rosie was surrounded by familiar faces, friends and family she hadn't seen in a long time. They were all so happy, celebrating the love between the bride and groom. But amidst the joy and laughter, Rosie felt a deep sadness. She couldn't help but wonder where Alex was, and if he had moved on, just like she had. As she mingled with old friends, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned around and froze. There, standing in front of her, was Alex. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They just stared at each other, both a little unsure of how to act. The years had passed, but it felt like no time had passed at all. The familiar warmth she had always felt when she was around him was still there. But there was also an awkwardness, an unspoken tension, a feeling that something important had been left unsaid between them. "Alex," Rosie finally said, breaking the silence. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to be here," Alex replied with a half smile. "But life's funny that way, isn't it?" They both laughed, but it was a nervous laugh, the kind you give when you don't quite know what to say next. They stood there for a while, exchanging small talk, the kind of conversation that felt superficial but necessary. Rosie asked about his work in America, and Alex asked about her life in Dublin. They both pretended that everything was fine, that time hadn't passed. But neither of them could shake the feeling that something was missing. As the night wore on, Rosie found herself thinking about Alex, more than she had in a long time. Seeing him again, something inside her, a mix of memories and emotions that she hadn't fully dealt with. She remembered the way he had always been there for her, the way he had made her laugh when things were tough. She remembered the kiss and how it had changed everything between them. But Rosie also realized something else. She had moved on. She had built a life for herself and Emily, and she was proud of that life. She couldn't go back to the past, no matter how much she might want to. The years apart had taught her that some things were meant to stay in the past. As the evening came to a close, Alex and Rosie shared a quiet moment outside the venue. The stars above sparkled in the clear night sky, and for a moment, it felt like they were back in Dublin, just the two of them, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. "I'm glad I ran into you, Rosie," Alex said softly. "I've missed you," Rosie smiled, her heart heavy with the emotions she had been keeping inside. "I've missed you too, Alex. But I think we both know things have changed." "Indeed," Alex agreed. "They have." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, but full of understanding. They both knew that the connection they had once shared would always be a part of them. But that was all it could be now, a part of the past. "Take care of yourself, Rosie," Alex said, his voice sincere. "And take care of Emily." "You too, Alex," Rosie replied. "I hope you find what you're looking for." As they said their goodbyes, Rosie watched Alex walk away, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. It wasn't the reunion she had imagined, but it was the one they needed, and she realized that some things, no matter how much you wish for them, are never meant to be. Part 6. The long-distance friendship. After their brief reunion at the wedding, Rosie and Alex returned to their separate lives, both feeling the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. Despite the years that had passed, neither was able to let go of the connection they shared, even if they both knew that the chance for something more had slipped away. In the weeks following their encounter, Rosie tried to move forward with her life. She was a devoted mother to Emily, pouring all of her energy into raising her daughter. Her days were filled with school runs, grocery shopping, and taking care of Emily, and at night she would settle down with a good book or watch a movie, trying to unwind after a long day. The familiar rhythms of her life kept her busy, but there were quiet moments, late at night, when her mind would wander to Alex. She missed their conversations, the way they used to talk about everything and nothing. The easy comfort of their friendship had always been one of the things she valued most in her life. But now it felt distant, almost like a dream she couldn't quite reach. She had Emily to care for, and she couldn't afford to dwell on things that were out of her control. Alex, too, tried to push through the discomfort of their reunion. He continued his life in America with Sarah, his girlfriend. While the relationship with Sarah was steady, it lacked the depth and understanding Alex had always felt with Rosie. The more time he spent with Sarah, the more he realized that something was missing. His heart wasn't fully in it. His mind kept drifting back to Rosie, to the way she had made him feel, to the way they had always been able to understand each other without saying a word. Despite this, Alex didn't know how to change things. He had built a life for himself in America, and he couldn't just walk away from it. Sarah cared for him, and he didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want to seem like he was running away from his life in America just because of his feelings for someone from his past. But as time passed, he found himself more and more distant from Sarah, even though they were still together. He knew something wasn't right, but he couldn't put it into words. The email exchanges between Rosie and Alex continued sporadically. They were polite, checking in on each other's lives, but there was always a sense of distance between them. Neither of them was ready to confront what they were both feeling. They hadn't fully addressed their emotions, and it was easier to just pretend that everything was fine. But even with the distance, both of them felt the pull toward each other. They couldn't stop thinking about the connection they shared, even if they both knew they had moved on in their own ways. One day, Alex received an email from Rosie that would change everything. It was a simple message, just telling him how Emily was growing so fast, how things were going in Dublin, and how Rosie was feeling. But at the end of the email, Rosie wrote something that struck a chord deep within Alex. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had taken a different path, if we hadn't let distance and time get in the way of our friendship. But I guess some things just meant to stay in the past, aren't they? Reading those words, Alex felt a rush of emotions. He had always wondered what could have been between them, if they had given their feelings a chance. But Rosie was right. Some things were meant to stay in the past. The years apart had changed them both, and the timing had never been right. But reading her words made Alex realize that no matter how much time had passed, no matter how many different paths they had taken, but there would always be a special place in his heart for Rosie. And maybe, just maybe, they would always wonder what could have been. He sat at his desk for a long time, staring at the email, trying to figure out what to say in response. He could write a casual reply, just like he had done before. But something inside him urged him to be honest. So, with a deep breath, he typed out his response. You're right, Rosie. Some things are meant to stay in the past, but I can't help wondering about the what-ifs, too. You'll always be someone special to me, no matter where life takes us. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. He wasn't sure where that email would take their friendship, or if it would change anything at all. But he knew it was the right thing to say. In the days that followed, Rosie received Alex's email. When she read his words, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had spent so many years trying to ignore the connection between them, but reading his response made her realize just how much she still cared for him. She too had wondered about the what-ifs, about the life they could have shared. But she had buried those feelings deep down, thinking it was too late to do anything about them. Rosie knew that they could never go back to the past. Too much had changed, and too many years had passed. But she also knew that their friendship, the bond they had shared, would never truly fade. It had been a part of her life for so long, and it had shaped who she was, even if they were no longer the people they once were. They would always have that history together. Rosie took a deep breath and replied to Alex's email, her heart filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She did know what the future held, but for now, she was content to know that they still shared something special, even from afar. Part 7. The Realization of Love. As the months passed, the quiet exchange of emails between Rosie and Alex became a thread that tied their distant worlds together. Neither of them had the courage to address the deep emotions that still lingered between them. They continued to live their separate lives, but something inside them had shifted. The past, while cherished, was something they both knew could never be relived. But the connection they shared, the understanding that had always existed between them, remained a part of who they were. Rosie continued to raise Emily, watching her grow up day by day. and often wondering what kind of life she would have had if things had been different. But in her heart, she knew that Emily was her world now. The love for her daughter was the most important thing in her life, and Rosie had learned to embrace that love fully. Alex, too, found peace in his life. His relationship with Sarah grew stronger, and though he cared for her deeply, there was still a part of him that couldn't forget Rosie. He had learned to accept the fact that some loves simply weren't meant to be, and sometimes you had to let them go. Yet, every now and then, he would find himself wondering what might have happened if he had acted differently. One crisp autumn day, Alex received an unexpected message from Rosie. It wasn't a long email, just a brief update. But the last line caught his attention. "I've been thinking a lot about the past lately, about you, about us, and I think it's time we talked, maybe even in person." The words hit him like a wave. Rosie wanted to meet. She wanted to talk. After all these years, after all the distance and misunderstandings, it felt like the universe was giving them one last chance to finally confront the emotions they had both buried for so long. Without hesitation, Alex replied, agreeing to meet her in Dublin. The flight was booked, and the excitement of seeing Rosie again stirred something deep inside him. He had never fully let go, and he couldn't deny the feelings he still had for her. This time, there was no hesitation. This time, they would face everything, no matter how hard it was. When Alex arrived in Dublin, it was as though time had rewound itself. The city felt both familiar and foreign to him. The streets they used to walk together seemed like echoes of a past that was both beautiful and bittersweet. His heart raced as he made his way to the coffee where Rosie had asked to meet. Rosie was already there when he arrived. She looked the same, yet different. The years had changed her, but in all the right ways. Her eyes still held that spark, that same warmth that had always drawn him to her. And when she looked up and saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart skip a beat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, looking at each other, both of them feeling the weight of everything they had been through. "Hi," Rosie said softly, her voice almost like a whisper. "It's been so long." "Indeed," Alex responded, his voice thick with emotion. "It has." They spent the next few hours talking, not just about the past, but about their lives, their choices, and everything that had led them to this point. They shared memories of their childhood, of their families, and of everything that had happened since they had parted ways. There were moments of laughter, moments of silence, and moments where neither of them knew what to say. But through it all, one thing became clear. They had both been living with the same question for years. What if they had been brave enough to pursue their feelings all those years ago? What if they had taken a different path? And in that moment, they both realized something they hadn't been able to admit before. They still loved each other, not just as friends, but as something more. The love they had always felt for one another had never truly faded. It had just been waiting for the right moment to come to the surface. As the afternoon turned into evening, Alex reached across the table and took Rosie's hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. It was a promise that they would face whatever came next together. "Rosie," Alex said softly, his voice full of emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I've never stopped loving you. I don't think I ever will." Tears filled Rosie's eyes as she looked at him, her heart full of the same love she had carried for so many years. "I love you too, Alex. I always have." It was then that they realized that sometimes love does come at the right time. Sometimes it has to be put on hold, waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances. And though their timing had always been off, in that moment, it felt like everything had finally fallen into place. They knew that they couldn't change the past, but they also knew that the future was theirs to shape. They didn't have all the answers, but they were ready to take the next step together, whatever that might look like. And so, Alex and Rosie found their way back to each other, not because it was easy, but because they knew that the love they shared was worth fighting for. No matter how much time had passed, no matter how much life had changed, they had found each other again, and that was all that mattered.